So we're here with Carl Wimmer today. He's running for the new District 4. It's going to be up against Jim Matheson. He succeeds in obtaining the nomination. So how are you doing?
Very good. Good to see you. Thank you.
So tell us about yourself.
I've been in the legislature for the last 5 years. Previous to that, I was fairly apolitical. I was working as a police officer. I had been a SWAT team commander, a patrolman, a canine officer, I had been a detective. I'd worked just about every area of law enforcement as you could. I was actually a very decorated law enforcement officer, and was just working hard to make ends meet when a series of events came together that led me to run for the legislature. And so the very first time I ever went to a caucus meeting was the same year I was a candidate on the ballot to run for the legislature. So I had never been to a caucus meeting before. I had never been a delegate before. Previous to me running for the legislature, I really didn't have any clue what those were. And I realized that there's a lot of people out there that are like that, and we need to wake them up and get them involved in the process. I entered into the legislature in 2007 was my first session, and I quickly gained a reputation of being a conservative leader. Someone who was not afraid to stand up for what I believed in, someone who was willing to stand tall and stand strong on issues that I was passionate about. And in fact, I was sometimes the only one who would stand up on an issue, but then others would stand as well. And I found that there's a lot of good people in the legislature, but sometimes it takes a little bit of courage and leadership to direct them, and I think that I added a little bit of that. Of course, there's other leaders in the legislature, but I think I brought something to the table that helped mold the last 5 years of the legislature, and helped found the Patrick Henry Caucus, which is a state sovereignty organization, and really been involved in some of the most significant pieces of legislation that we've passed over the last 5 years, and it's been a great experience.
So what are the principles that drew you to the Republican Party?
I am a constitutional conservative. I believe in limited government, keeping government as small as possible, particularly the federal government. I believe, as James Madison said in Federalist 45, that the powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined. I believe that, and I believe in what I consider to be the proper role of government, which is to protect our inalienable rights, our God-given rights, that really all rights are inherent in the person, and that we delegate authority to the government. It doesn't work the other way around. That drew me to the Republican platform, because the Republican platform is the one that stands for those principles. And so that's why I'm a Republican.
Of the Founding Fathers, which one would you say has had the most profound influence on your ideology?
There are several Founding Fathers who stand out in my mind. John Hancock, Samuel Adams, these two men who were so courageous, and in fact were very key in starting our war for liberty against England, and starting the Revolutionary War, and in molding the direction of this country. But I would say that the Founding Father that I most admire is Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry was a fiery orator who believed passionately in the principles of liberty, and it was he who at St. John's Church, when Virginia was meeting together to decide if they were going to join the war against England, and everyone in the church, all the men in the church were saying, no, we should stay out of it, we should stay out of it. And Patrick Henry stood, and he gave a fiery, passionate speech that led to every man in that church rising to their feet and yelling, to arms, men, to arms. And you know this speech, and it ends, with, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. That speech is filled with power and passion, and I believe that his speech, which convinced Virginia to join the Revolutionary War, the war against Britain, really changed the direction of the war and helped us to win the war and gain our freedom.
You're one of the founding members of the Patrick Henry Caucus, so I thought I'd ask, what are the accomplishments of the caucus that you are the most proud of?
We have accomplished a tremendous amount for the state of Utah and for the country in general. We have fought back against the ever-increasing size of the federal government who comes in and locks up our land. We have passed legislation that is strong legislation that has led to us trying to reclaim our lands here in the state of Utah so that we can develop them for energy and for resources which we can sell the lands as was intended, or develop the lands, and that money is intended to go to our educational system, and it would help our economy incredibly. Probably the thing that I'm most proud about the Patrick Henry Caucus was the legislation that I was honored to be the chief sponsor of in 2010. It was a 4-page piece of legislation that said if Congress, because they had not done it yet, if Congress passes a healthcare takeover, it would not be recognized in the state of Utah, and no citizen in the state of Utah would be required by any government agency to purchase healthcare insurance or be considered a criminal, because that is what Obamacare does when it's fully implemented. Of course, the people on the left, the Democrats, called it a worthless message bill and said that it would do nothing. At the exact same time, Congress passes Obamacare. 26 states file a lawsuit against Obamacare. We were part of that lawsuit. We filed in the Florida federal court. Immediately, the federal government filed a motion to dismiss, saying the states don't have standing. There's no state in the union that had a law in the books before Obama signed the health care bill. The Judge Roger Vincent, took that under advisement, and about a year ago he came out with his decision, and here's what happened. In the bill that I drafted, we put a clause in there called an immediate effective date. And what that means is if the bill passes in the House with 2/3 and passes in the Senate with 2/3, as soon as the governor signs it, it's law of the land. That's usually not the way it works. As soon as the governor signs a bill, usually it doesn't take effect for a couple months, possibly the next fiscal year. But this one was going to take immediate effect. What the judge in Florida realized and found was that it was March 23rd of 2010 that President Obama signed Obamacare into law. March 22nd, the day before, Governor Herbert signed my bill into law. The judge ruled Utah had a law in the books. 24 hours was all that stood in the way, but the judge ruled that Utah had a law in the books. Idaho also had a law in the books. And because we had a law in the books, we had standing. Because we had standing, all 26 states had standing. He ruled that Obamacare was unconstitutional, and that lawsuit is now in the United States Supreme Court, where next week you're going to start hearing testimony to overturn Obamacare. And I believe we're going to win. And it was 2 little flyover states, Idaho and Utah, with the Patrick Henry Caucus leading the way to overturn Obamacare.
So that would actually make it so that tomorrow would be the 2nd anniversary of that bill's passage.
Yeah, tomorrow, 2 years tomorrow, March 22nd, Governor Herbert signed that bill into law.
Well, on behalf of the Young Republicans, thank you. What were some of the things that the Patrick Henry Caucus had hoped to accomplish that you weren't able to quite get done?
You know, there was a series of things, and we're still working on it. The Patrick Henry Caucus is still in existence, and it's still moving forward. But it's been tougher to organize other states than we had anticipated. We have other states who have other organizations. The Patrick Henry Caucus is alive and well throughout the United States in other states. But it's not as well organized as it should be. And frankly, it would take a tremendous effort with full-time employees to do so. And that's very difficult when we're also legislators and full-time parents, and we're workers, and we hold down jobs. And it's very difficult to do that. It's a grassroots organization, citizen and legislator combined together to push back against the federal government. That's the idea, is to just, it's not a radical idea. It's a very simple idea. We just want balance in our government. We want the federal government and the state government to be balanced. Not one dominating the other, just balanced federalism. That's the idea, and I think that's the purpose behind it.
How do you feel about the Utah solution for immigration, and what would you like to have seen done differently?
Well, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the U.S. Constitution clearly lays out that Congress shall create uniform rules of naturalization. It is within their purview to create the rules and to enforce the rules. I was not a supporter of the Utah immigration reform, HB 116. I'm still not a fan of that legislation for a couple reasons. First of all, Milton Friedman, who is probably top 5 favorite economists throughout history, and he was Ronald Reagan's economist, he was a big supporter of open borders. He was a free market guy, but even he said that open borders will not work in a welfare nation. And we have a welfare nation. We have a nation that when you can come to this country, get free health care, free education, free food stamps, housing, discounted college tuition, and driver's licenses, you're going to come. And it's going to cost the American people a tremendous amount of money. We're talking billions of dollars. And so what we did was we incentivized people to come to the state of Utah by creating a workers program, and incentivizing others to come, more people to come, without taking away the taxpayer subsidized benefits that go to those who are here, possibly illegally. That is a problem because it will help to bankrupt the state and it will help to put us further into the hole. We have got to have real reform. I don't blame the states for wanting to push back because the federal government has completely failed us in this area. They are not taking on their responsibility, their constitutional role. And so I understand the state's frustration, and I do support the states going forward with some reforms and some enforcement. They have to do that to defend their sovereignty. But for a state to start giving out work visas and to incentivize people to come to the state, I don't think that's good policy.
You had mentioned Milton Friedman as one of your top favorite economists. So I guess that kind of answers the next question that I've been asking, is whether you lean to Keynesianism or more free market like Ludwig von Mises or F.A. Hayek. Who would your top favorite economist be?
I really respect Friedrich Hayek and am a student of Austrian economics. Someone who believes in free markets and laissez-faire economy. I don't know if he classifies as an economist, but one of the people who has most affected my political views throughout my growth in the political world is Frederick Bastiat, who wrote The Law, and he wrote some other books as well. I oftentimes make the joke, Frederick Bastiat and I were born on the same day, June 30th.
Really?
We have the same birthday. And so good people were born on June 30th. But, Hayek and Bastiat and the followers of Austrian economics, that's what I believe in.
So just because the media is not dropping this, and I have to ask, do you or any other Republicans that you know plan to take away contraception?
I have no plans. It's not part of my platform for the federal government at all. I did follow the legislation that Utah had passed somewhat. I wasn't in the legislature at the time. But I have been the chairman for the last several years, the chairman of the Utah Family Action Council. Mm-hmm. The Utah Family Action Council is a big conglomeration of the pro-family organizations here in the state. It's a committee with several leaders from different organizations, and we took a position of support for that legislation that Representative Bill Wright had drafted and passed. And so we were disappointed that it was vetoed. I can understand Governor Herbert's point of view on this, although I disagree with him. I can understand his point of view, and in fact he has mentioned that he would like to see the bill come back, which is a few minor changes, and I think that we can get it done.
This is, of course, in reference to the bill changing sex ed for the state of Utah?
Yeah, exactly
okay.
Right. That's right.
Okay. So along those lines, there's been a lot of outrage over some of the comments made recently by Rush Limbaugh at one of the proponents of government-sponsored contraception. There's been a lot of people who have been attacking his advertisers, and there have been some who have even taken it to the extreme of, well, government should get in there and shut them up. Do you feel that government would have a role in censoring radio?
I mean, they already do to some extent. There's already decency standards. But to infringe upon Rush Limbaugh's freedom of speech, his First Amendment rights, and as well as the advertisers, their right to advertise with him or not advertise with him, well, that's just ludicrous. That's offensive to me. Because the Bill of Rights matters to me, every one of them, including the freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. That matters. I do believe that we could be maybe a little more cordial in the way we talk with each other. And of course, people in Washington, D.C., it's political theater, and it seems like everyone is just begging to get in front of the camera to fight and argue. And that's part of the reason that Congress has an 8% approval rating. But certainly, Rush Limbaugh has a right to express his opinions, and without being excoriated and without having people calling for censorship. I think that's silly. In addition, further, I completely on principle, I agree with the concept that government should not be subsidizing contraception. You know, it's interesting. The people who are calling and clamoring for government to subsidize contraception are the same people that want government to stay completely out of the bedroom and completely out of the abortion issue. They say, don't tell me what to do with my body, yet I want you to fund my contraception. It seems a little hypocritical to me.
With that, given the likes of Bill Maher and some of the comments they've made, do you think that there's a double standard in how people are outraged at what Limbaugh has said but completely ignore comments made by some of the people on the extreme left?
I would say there's absolutely a double standard. I don't have all the facts as to why there's a double standard, and whether it is a double standard perpetuated by the media, that's a possibility, or what the case is. But there's no doubt that some of the things that have been said about Sarah Palin by the far left talk show hosts were far more offensive than what Rush Limbaugh has said. Although I do believe that Rush Limbaugh probably should have been a little gentler in what he was saying. The bottom line is there's not the same outcry. There's not the same scrutiny, and that's unfortunate, because if we're going to hold Americans to the same standard, we should hold them to the same standard regardless of their political views. That's the way I've always felt.
That actually brings up another question. I think if you take a look at how the media has been handling, say, Occupy Wall Street versus, say, the Tea Party, or any Republican organization for that matter, a lot of people forget that Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid were calling the Republicans extremists and party of no well before the Tea Party ever emerged on the scene. Do you feel that the media has been fair in how they have cast Republicans and conservatives as opposed to how they glorify the left?
Clearly there has been unfair and I believe biased reporting, because Occupy Wall Street seems to be the darling of the media. They seem to, in fact, do no wrong in the eyes of some of the national media outlets, whereas the Tea Parties have always been accused of being hate-filled and angry. In fact, a personal experience for me, I'm now running for Congress, obviously, and as I meet with people, what's amazing is as I'm in town hall meetings and as I meet with people, people say, man, you know, you're nothing like I thought you were. And I said, well, have we met before? And they said, no. I said, well, where are you getting your information? They said, well, from the newspapers and the media. I said, okay, well, what was your perception? And they said, well, my perception of you was that you were angry, bitter, intransigent, just stubborn conservative that is hard to get along with. And I almost chuckle to myself, because anyone who knows me knows that I am very happy, very just a nice individual who, yes, I am firm on my principles and I stand firm on what I believe. The fact is, I stand up and I voice how I feel. Mm-hmm. And I'm outspoken on the principles that I believe made America great. And so it's, in one way, I've been labeled as what they call extreme. And as I talk to people, I say, well, you hear that I'm extreme. Well, let's address that. What is extreme? I'm pro-life. Are you pro-life? And they'll say, yeah, I'm pro-life. I said, I want to repeal Obamacare. Do you want to repeal Obamacare? They'll say, yeah. I said, okay. I would like Utah to have more control over its public lands rather than have the federal government have control. Do you agree? And they say, yeah, I agree. Okay, good. I believe in the Second Amendment. You believe in the Second Amendment? Well, sure. Okay. Well, then, in the eyes of the media, you're an extremist. And I have to tell you, if that's what an extremist is, then I accept the label. Because the fact is, most of the people in Utah believe in the principles that I have just laid out. But the fact, if you stand up and you voice your opinion and you stand up on those principles, which are really just the principles of the Republican Party, you get labeled as an extremist.
I guess for our final question, what recommendations would you make if elected to Congress to the Congress and to the President for dealing with Iran and all the saber rattling that's happening in the Middle East?
I think the best way for me to answer this particular question is to give you my overall foreign policy principles. I come from a military family. My father was in the 82nd Airborne Division. My parents had 5 boys and we have 1 sister. Of the 5 boys, 3 of them are career Army. The other 2, myself included, are career law enforcement. My parents instilled in us from a very young age a deep love for God, family, and country. And I believe we need a strong military and a strong national defense. But I am fairly non-interventionist. I do not want to put our men and women in uniform into battle and send them into war unless there is a threat to our nation and our nation's sovereignty. That is very important to me. I want to make sure that when there is a war, that it is actually a constitutional war under Article 1, Section 8, where Congress has the authority to declare war. Those are the things I want to see. Those are the things I believe in. The Iran situation is very, very volatile. Very volatile because you have somebody over there who hates the United States. And we can go back throughout history and see that some of the decisions that both sides have made have kind of led to this situation. And we need to be very cautious. We need to be very open and just take things slow and be very cautious before we send our soldiers into battle. Because what we're asking is we're asking people to die. And we're asking, and that's a serious sacrifice. And for someone who has brothers in the military, I have to be willing to say, yep, you know what, this is a cause that is worth sending them to potentially die. And that's a heavy burden. And so it has to be something that defends our nation or our sovereignty before I'm willing to take that step. With that being said, I am a strong proponent of Israel. I have personal history with Israel, personal friendships. When I was on the SWAT team, I actually trained with some of the Israeli Special Forces for a period of time and gained a tremendous amount of respect for these people. And so my strong support of Israel goes very deep and very personal.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.